Aisha House. I'm the Vice President for Congressional and Public Affairs here at the Millennium Challenge Corporation. And we have a really exciting program for you today. So before we begin, I'd like to share just a few This is great. So this meeting is being recorded. That's the first housekeeping rule. A couple of more housekeeping rules too. On translation, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a globe that offers interpretation in French. If you are opting to use French, please mute your original audio so that you can hear clearly the French interpretation. Okay. The third housekeeping item and final is post-event. Everyone who has RSVP'd for this event will receive a link to the final session. And this link will also be available on MCC's website for anyone who's interested in seeing it later. Great. And now to the business at hand. Welcome again to the Millennium Challenge Corporation and the National Endowment for Democracy's panel on the complex path to achieving democratic dividends. During our discussion today, we will hear from the leadership of MCC and NED, two heads of state, and two civil society leaders on how their countries embrace democracy and good governance. We will also see that countries that deliver for their people shows how democracy delivers dividends across the social, economic, and political fabrics of a country. Our panelists will provide more insight. Without further ado, let me introduce our panelists today. Our co-hosts are Madam CEO, Ms. Alice Albright of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or MCC. Mr. Ken Wallach, Chairman of the Board of the National Endowment for Democracy, or NED. Our honored guest, His Excellency, President Adama Barrow of the Republic of the Gambia. President Barrow is only the third president of the Gambia and came into office in 2017. His Excellency, Patrick Achi, Prime Minister of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire. He previously served as Secretary General of the Presidency and the Minister of State. And our experts and community leaders from the Gambia, Mr. Mar Nyang, the founder and executive director of Gambia Participates. Gambia Participates is an organization that has been working on various initiatives geared towards strengthening anti-corruption, fiscal transparency, and election integrity. And from Cote d'Ivoire, Dr. Flan Moke Cesar, research professor from the Alassane Ouattara University and founder of the Center for Political Research of Abidjan, whose expertise includes topics such as national reconciliation, social cohesion, and elections and peace. We are excited to welcome our panelists and discuss how both the Gambia and Cote d'Ivoire, two countries that are partners with the Millennium Challenge Corporation and NED, have been working to help governments and civil society deliver development results for their people. And with that, thank you all for joining, and I'll turn it to you, Alice.
Thanks so much, Aisha. And let me add my welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to everybody. It's just wonderful to have people here in person, also online. Please, of course, if you're here, help yourself to coffee and goodies outside. So as Aisha has said, my name is Alice Albright. I'm the CEO of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be co-hosting this event with you, my dear friend Ken Wallach, as Aisha says, the chairman of the National Endowment for Democracy, but we're going to shorten it to NED today. We are also so excited and deeply honored to welcome our very distinguished guests from the Gambia and Cote d'Ivoire, two countries with whom MCC has had the honor to work with, and they also work with NED. And as you will hear, we will talk about fostering economic growth and strengthening democracy. I'd also like to welcome our very special guests, Ambassador Ba from the Gambia, former U.S. Ambassador to the Gambia, Carl Pascual, the current U.S. ambassadors who I understand are online with us, Ambassador also Ba to the Cote d'Ivoire, and also Ambassador Cromer, who is the U.S. ambassador currently serving in the Gambia. As President Biden has said, we are at a global inflection point. More than 2/3 of the world's population now live in countries that are backsliding from democratic principles or are operating under authoritarian rule. So the defining question, both here in the US and globally, is whether democracies will continue to deliver for their people in what is a rapidly changing world. So the US has launched the Summit for Democracy process, first in early 2021, to put a high-level focus on the need to strengthen democratic institutions, protect human rights, and accelerate the fight against corruption, both at home and abroad. So it is an incredible honor, a great honor for MCC to be part of this summit, hosting with Ned and joining our colleagues throughout the Biden-Harris administration, and also our co-hosts abroad, including President Hichilema, Prime Minister Ruto, President Chavez, and President Yoon. Let me turn to the work of MCC. Helping democracies deliver is at the heart of MCC's work. The agency was created in 2004 with the specific mandate to reduce poverty through economic growth, but only with those countries that are lower income and those that are committed to strong governance and remaining on a democratic pathway. We undertake this mandate by being very selective, but also as responsive as we can be to countries' priorities and what their citizens need and want. In other words, MCC helps democratic partners deliver. As we near the 20-year mark for the agency, which is hard to believe, we have an impressive track record to be proud of, and in doing so, help democratic partners deliver for their people. Thus far, we have entered into 74 compacts and thresholds across 46 countries in 5 continents. We've deployed $15 billion in program support, and we estimate that we've helped 270 million people. When I look at the totality of these investments, they cover what I call the basics. 11% have been in water and sanitation, 14% in agriculture, 17% in energy, 27% in transportation, and 12% in health and education. And you can look at our current congressional budget justification document to get a lot more details about what that all means. I'm going to put up an advertisement for Aisha. Where's Aisha? Aisha. This is Aisha's innovation this year. You can actually get a QR code on little cards to actually get the CBJ. So we're trying to save paper. But it is a fantastic document, and we'll dig into all of those results that I just mentioned. I've also seen this track record through the traveling that I've done in the year and plus a bit that I've been at the agency. I now see that water is available. I now meet with students, often women, who are getting the skills they need to access the job market. I now have met with women who are getting titles to land, and so they can now more easily set up agriculturally based businesses. I've now met with communities who are getting much better access to heat and heat that is regulated. I've also met with an entrepreneur who is setting up a solar panel plant, that's a bit of a tongue twister, to help transition his country to more renewable sources of energy. And these are only but a few of the people that I've met with since I've been here. At MCC, we see our work vis-a-vis the democracy agenda as being a two-way street. On the one hand, we are very selective, and we will only work with those countries that have demonstrated a strong commitment to becoming and remaining democracies. In fact, we publish, this is another bit of the show and tell, the scorecards from every country every year. It's on our internet. It's also in my book, which I keep in my office, so that you can actually track how all of the countries that we work with or might work with are doing against our 20 indicator scorecard. In fact, one of the key points of our accountability is that often, or actually not so often, thank goodness, but from time to time, we have to step away from countries that have themselves made a decided step not to be democratic when there's, for example, a coup. And in those cases, we have to suspend or terminate. But for those countries that are eligible, we help work with those countries so that they can deliver better for their people and build the foundations for those democracies to thrive. There are a number of aspects of our business model that help us do this. In addition to being selective, we are very country-owned, both in how we help identify priorities with countries, but also in how we implement our work. we're transparent, and we're also very consultative with both the private sector as well as civil society organizations in the countries that we work. So there are countless examples of what this all means in practice. In a moment, we will hear from two of our dear partners, the Côte d'Ivoire and the Gambia. So I don't want to steal their thunder, but let me share with you two other examples outside of the continent. One is Timor-Leste. This is, of course, one of the world's youngest and most vibrant democracies, becoming independent after nearly 25 years of occupation. In Timor-Leste, MCC is investing $420 million in water, sanitation, and education. These investments will improve health, reduce disease burden due to contaminated water sources, and enhance teaching and learning at the secondary school level. And altogether, we expect to benefit about 1 million Timorese, which represents about 75% of the population. These priorities were identified by the Timor-Leste government and the Timorese people as the opportunities that they wanted to work on to reduce poverty. Similarly, in Kosovo, we've been supporting another young democracy in its quest to expand access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy. First through a $49 million threshold program, and now through a $202 million compact, both seeking to improve the functionality and efficiency of the energy sector. Our compact there is the result of intense collaboration with the government and civil society, and is expected to benefit about 1.8 million Kosovans, which represent over 95% of the country's population. So you can see in both examples, Timor-Leste and Kosovo, that these investments will clearly make a dent in the well-being of the citizens in those countries. But the pathway, one of the things we've learned in our nearly 20 years is the pathway towards democracy and strong development outcomes is not linear and almost always complicated. We have some incredible examples of today of countries whose leadership is dedicated to building their countries into stronger democracies despite a challenging history. So I'm honored today to be joined by President Barrow and Prime Minister Achi, leaders from two countries that not too long ago were either suffering under authoritarianism, in the case of the Gambia, or experiencing a deadly civil conflict, in the case of the Côte d'Ivoire. But nonetheless, these countries have made remarkable progress towards strengthening democracy and implementing programs that will have tangible benefits for their people. So today we will hear from both President Barrow and Prime Minister Achi about these commendable journeys. And we recognize that each country is on a journey, and that is why MCC is so humbled and so proud to be able to work with both countries to help deliver economic growth for their citizens. Côte d'Ivoire is often cited as an example of what we call the MCC effect. This is where a country adopts the MCC scorecard as a roadmap for reform, and then puts in place the necessary decisions to improve the scores on our now signature product, our scorecard. In 2011, President Ouattara set up a committee that was solely focused on becoming eligible for MCC assistance. And due to sustained efforts over a decade, Côte d'Ivoire moved from passing 5 to 11 indicators. And with that, we are now nearing the end of implementing a $536 million compact focused on transportation of goods and people and secondary education and technical skills development. We estimate that this compact will benefit about 11.3 million people and provide significant benefits to the Ivorian economy over the next 20 years. And we estimate that about 40% of the population will be impacted by these investments. We are also at the early stages of talking with Côte d'Ivoire about a regional energy program that will help improve energy availability in the region. The Gambia has also been making significant strides on its overall scores and now passes 14 out of 20 indicators on the scorecard. As a result, MCC is implementing a $25 million threshold program that will be focused on electricity. Just now in December 2022, the board of directors of MCC selected the Gambia for a compact as a result of the country's continued progress. And we are now in the early stages of both the threshold and also beginning to think through what the compact might involve. So let me conclude by turning over to Ken. Of course, and as I've discussed, MCC's counterpart principally in countries is the governments. but we also have to have a very strong civil society in the countries that we work. And this is where the work that NED and all of its constituent organizations comes in, because in many ways our work is very much reinforcing and dependent on the great work that you all do. So Ken, let me welcome you to MCC, and it's just wonderful to have you co-hosting this event with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alice. At the outset, I want to thank the political and civic leaders from Cote d'Ivoire and the Gambia who are joining us today. And I also want to express my appreciation to Alice Albright and the MCC for reaching out to the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, to co-host this event. It represents, I believe, our tradition of public-private partnerships in efforts to advance development and democracy globally. The NED is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. It was an outgrowth of an initiative, a bipartisan initiative by the US Congress, as a result of an historic speech by President Reagan in 1982 before the British Parliament. And we have been proud over the last 40 years to support courageous Democrats in every region of the world who are struggling against tremendous odds to create better lives for their fellow citizens. We have long argued that democracy is the most sustainable model for stability, prosperity, and peace. Overseas, the interplay between government and civil society represents the hallmark of democratic governance that is citizen-centered. I recall the landmark Human Development Report by the UNDP, which concluded that democratic participation and politics is a critical end of human development, as well as a means of achieving it. Or Sweden's development cooperation policy, which asserts that poverty is not only about inadequate social economic development, but also the lack of political power at the individual level. And it was the writings of Nobel laureate Amartya Sen which challenged the Lee hypothesis, named after the late Singapore leader Lee Kuan Yew, which claimed that authoritarian systems are better at bringing about economic development. Sen, a renowned economist, argued the opposite, but then conceded that even if there is no clear correlation between economic growth and democracy in either direction, democracy and political liberty have importance in themselves, and the case for them remains untarnished. The problem with autocratic regimes is that when they are wrong, there is no one to stop them from making disastrous decisions. China's march to economic growth, excuse me, masked the millions who were killed during the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. And today, widespread protests emerged after the country's opaque COVID policies and internet censorship. As we scan the globe, hotspots more likely to erupt into violence are found, for the most part, in areas of the world that are non-democratic. These are places that experience ethnic conflict and civil war, harbor terrorists, and generate refugee flows across borders. Regimes that repress their own citizens are more likely to act aggressively beyond their borders. This is tragically being played out today in Ukraine. Regimes that lack accountability mechanisms or sufficient political and social inclusion are usually plagued by corruption or conflict or both. Deforestation, rural dislocation, environmental degradation, and agricultural policies that lead to famine, all traced to political systems in which the victims have no political voice, in which government institutions feel no obligation to answer to the people, and in which special interests feel free to exploit the resources, land, and people without fear of oversight or the need to account. Now, to be fair, relations between government and civil society is not always smooth, but that is natural. Democracy does not eliminate societal tensions, but rather seeks to manage those tensions peacefully. The fact is, the relationship between civil society on one hand and government and political institutions on the other hand is symbiotic, representing the only path toward greater citizen-centered governance. Thank you very much. Alice, back to you.
Thank you, Ken. So let me, before we get into now the panel part of our discussion, on behalf of the Biden administration, thank you, Ken, for being with us, and thank our guests. This is, of course, a very busy time of year, and we're most grateful to everybody for taking the time to join us, many from near and many from far. So let me start. What's going to happen now is that I will pose a question to President Barrow and also to Prime Minister Achi, who are with us virtually, and then I'll turn it over to Ken to pose further questions to our two guests from the civil society organizations. So let me turn it over. Let me just say, is President Barrow, are you with us? Hi, President Barrow, Your Excellency. Can you hear us?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Nice to see you, President Barrow.
Pleasure.
So, Excellency, let me, if I may, let me start with you and say, first of all, as you have previously noted, your country has undertaken significant efforts to consolidate democracy and progress. It'd be great if you could share with us some details about the ways in which democracy has helped your country begin to deliver growth, and some of the challenges that you have encountered along the way. So, Excellency, President Barrow, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Bright. It's a great pleasure and an honor for me as president to be invited to this very important meeting. And first of all, before going further, I will thank the U.S. government and the president and the organizers of this very important meeting. As president of the Gambia, I will seize this opportunity to thank the MCC, in the first place, for recognizing Gambia. I think it's a vote of confidence for us. It has given us a lot of courage that we are moving on the right direction. So really, we are very, very grateful. Before going to the question, first I will thank you for having me on this important panel. And I recognize the presence of my fellow panelists. I will give you a background of our democracy. I will begin with a little background on our democratic journey. Having experienced 3 decades of democracy and over 20 years of dictatorship, the Gambia has seen dividends of democracy in building our institutions and championing democracy, including freedom of expression. This is just a background, but Gambia, since we became independent, for 30 years, we had democratic government in place. But within that 30 years, we were interrupted. There was an attempted coup in 1981. It was led by a civilian who collaborated with some security forces to overthrow our government. That was in 1981. It caused a lot of problem for our government at that time, and it caused a civil unrest in our country for about 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks, a lot of people lost their life, and also businesses were attacked in this country. It affected our economy, and that was a very difficult situation for Gambia because it's led to a lot of consequences. That was the time Gambians started to queue for basic commodities, fuel, rice, and etc. etc. I am going to school by then, but I think I experienced it. Usually during the weekend, I go queue for rice to buy for our family use. So that is like we have seen both coins. We have seen democracy, and we have also experienced dictatorship. In addition, the Gambia became the smiling coast of Africa, despite the slow pace of development due to our small economy. Unfortunately, we lost most of those gains under dictatorship. In 1994, coup curtailed civil liberty and destroyed institutional setups and procedures, while the economy stagnated to less than 2 months import cover. So that means we have seen the two sides, that is democracy and dictatorship. We have seen the impact of democracy, and we have also experienced the effect of dictatorship. That's why during the dictatorship, our economy was completely broken and our institutions were seriously affected. So that is a clear indication that I think the best system is to maintain democracy. Restoring democracy through the democratic process build the confidence of our citizens to demand more accountability. Taking office in 2017, my government focused on restoring peace, rebuilding our democratic institutions and values, and protecting civil liberties by opening media space, by approving license for private media, TV, and radio. The time I came to power in 2017, there was no private TV. It was just the national television. And the national television was completely controlled, managed by the state. And radio station, private radio station were very few, and their programs were also controlled. Basically, what they were doing in those days before my coming to power, they do advertisement, play music, and that was their role, basically. Because they don't have the freedom to have other programs that are not endorsed by the government. So their lancing basically was limited to advertise and play music. Basically, that's where they were limited. When we came to power, we opened the space. They were free, and they have their own programs, independent program for that matter. Even they have phone-in programs. Sometimes they have phone-in programs of the president and my government. So that opened the space for the private media. Democratic dividends within a short span of 5 years made it possible for taxpayers to demand evidence of paying taxes and regain faith and confidence in the judiciary and governance framework. Independent, I don't know how do I put it. We used to have machinery judges in this country. When we came, we reformed the judiciary. In these reforms, our direction and focus was to make sure that we Gambianize the judiciary. To our credit, I think the judiciary now at the magistrate level, we have about 98% of Gambians as magistrates. And so the judiciary was reformed. Now we have independence of the judiciary that have given confidence to a lot of Gambians and a lot of investors to associate themselves with our government and to invest in this country. And today, I can tell you that the judiciary is very independent. And obviously, investors cannot invest in your country if they are not sure of your institutions. So we are trying to build strong institutions. Civil liberty is at its height, and remittances from Gambians in the diaspora and investments all resulted in a turnaround in the country. Because our people living outside this country, but they have confidence in the government, feeling that there is democracy in this country, and the environment is conducive enough for them to invest. So they have confidence in the government. That's why they are now sending a lot of money. I think that is now contributing to almost about 20% of our GDP, the remittances. So this is the people living outside this country who are contributing to our economy, and makes also we access foreign exchange. So they are really participating in the economic growth of this country. But without the democratic space, they wouldn't have contributed, wouldn't have sent that much money to the Gambia to invest in the Gambia. It's because of the confidence. That's why that is now happening. Until the impact of COVID-19 and the war between Russia and Ukraine, our economy grew up to 6% in 2019. When I took power, the economy was growing between 1% and 2%. But because of the democratic space, because of part of our reforms, the economy was growing up to 6%. And that also, when I came to power, our debt to GDP was up to 120%. Our treasury bill interest rates were up to 23%. Banks were lending at 30%. And inflation was almost double digits. But there was a turnaround when we came to power. And we are a tax-based economy, and we intensify domestic mobilization. Our collection increased by almost 100%. So these are all evidence that the democratic space is now really consolidated in the Gambia. Unfortunately, it dropped by almost half, but has started to pick up to around 5% in the first quarter of 2023. Democracy brought in accountability, and we are able to invest domestic revenue in infrastructure development in remote areas. Communities were isolated for such development. For over 50 years, we rely on donor support on such roads. Under my leadership, government within 5 years was able to mobilize domestic resources and build a number of standard roads across the country. There was deficit in our infrastructural development. So we rely on donor support to build some of our roads. I can just give you an example. There was a road that is about 120 kilometers. When I came to power, we are trying to mobilize resources from our donors. It took them more than 30 years to mobilize the resources to build that road. And when we came to power, we were able to mobilize resources, domestic resource mobilization. We were able to build basically between 500 to 600 kilometers of roads. So it has taken us to mobilize resources for 30 years to build 120 kilometers. But within 5 years, we are able to build on our own. We are able to build between 400 to 500 kilometers of road network. And these are areas that are remote areas. We call them here hard to reach areas. Because of the road network, people used to travel 12 hours to get to those areas. Today, with a good driver, it will take you 4 hours. But with a bad driver, it will take you 3 hours to get to those areas. During the periods, new and modern classrooms with solar light and health facilities were built, and the process is ongoing. Electricity is reaching rural and new settlements that never thought it was possible in a short period of time. Electricity these are social projects. You cannot develop without electricity. Today we are expanding electricity, and Gambia is targeting universal access by 2025. The African target is 2030, but our target now is 2025. We will achieve universal access to electricity. Electricity is our social projects, and electricity create jobs. So we are doing very well in that area also, and I think these are social projects that are very, very important to us, and we are still discussing with our partners who are also partnering with us to support us to make sure that we achieve this universal access. These are among many examples of social projects accompanied by legal and security sector reform that are expanding development, promoting peace, driving the fight to end poverty, and provide access for hard-to-reach communities. The security sector was really polluted, and we try to reform the security sector. It was not the reform alone, but to overhaul. That's why we have to audit the security sector in the first place. It's the first time in the history of our country. And also, we did an assessment to exactly be certain of what type of security do we have in this country. So we did all that, and we put policies also in place. For the first time, we have a security policy. We could have a security strategy, and we have a defense policy also. So this all happened during these 5 years, and these are all good practice. And you cannot reform without getting this policy in place, because you use the policies as a guide. That's what we are doing, and we have achieved that. Now we are going further to right size. We normally say downsize, but they say the right word is right sizing. So we are trying to right size. Coupled with new laws, policies, and programs, and the support from partners like MCC, the Gambia is enjoying dividends of democracy. After all this brief statement, I think it is a proof beyond any reasonable doubt that the democracy is doing very well for our country. But we have challenges. We will come to the challenges maybe later. We have challenges. The challenges. My first point as our challenges are resources. I think resources are our challenges. We are a tax-based economy, and our collection is limited. We are trying to expand our collection to make sure that we can rely on domestic resource mobilization to make sure we meet the demand of our economy. But it is very, very challenging. But I think with the support of our partners like MCC, that can make a big difference for us. The expansion of the democratic space comes with challenges at the institutional level to build human resource capacity on emerging scientific methodologies such as artificial intelligence and limited new technologies. Technology is key. That's why we have even created a new ministry, the Ministry of Digital Economy, because we want to move to a system whereby it is digitized, that is e-governance, so that it will be efficient, and also it can help us to manage corruption. This is what we are doing now, and I think it is key. But we need our partners to partner us so that we can digitize our system. Limitation in skills area limit job opportunities because the high unemployment and underemployment among the youthful population. Employment is a challenge. Unemployment is a challenge, and that's why we are now fighting irregular migration, because our youthful population, the youthful population is about 65%. It is a challenge for us. If they are not employed, they take other journeys, and these are the risky journeys to go to Europe, to the Western world. Realizing that it is possible to have major infrastructure works in a short period of time, the demand for social projects that impact the life of the people are only increased. People demand is increasing. Natural causes as a result of climate change resulting in floods and storms, and winds put pressure on government budgets for disaster relief. The slow of our economic growth for 3 years, 2020 to 2022, impacted the pace of responding to citizens' demand for social projects. Limited funding and cumbersome processes for donor support are equally challenging for the timely delivery of resources for our people. On civil liberty, the challenges include a continuous negotiation of the public space for freedom of expression and the fine line with hate speeches threatening peace and stability. Improving on the governance environment can be challenging. For instance, building evidence for corruption allegation confused is one such challenge. Cases have been thrown out of court for lack of enough evidence for the prosecution to prove its case. The constant demand for national security for people and their properties to feel safe is among the challenges. Thank you very much, and we are really, once more again, we are honored. It's a great pleasure on behalf of the Gambia, on behalf of the government and the Gambian people. We thank you for inviting us and for recognizing us also, as I said, is a vote of confidence for us. It's very encouraging. I think these have put in a lot of energy in the entire government to us to move forward with our democracy, to make sure that we have strong institutions in place, and also build on the gains of our democracy, build a strong foundation of democracy going forward. Thank you.
Prime Minister Achi,
Yes.
your government. Prime Minister Achi, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Prime Minister Achi.
How
Nice
are
to
you?
hear your voice.
But you changed my image, my face.
Can you hear us okay, Prime Minister Achi?
I can hear you fine.
Oh, good. Okay. So your country has prioritized governance reforms in the past years that have helped strengthen democratic institutions in your country. Could you let us know your thoughts about how these reforms have helped deliver developmental progress for citizens in the Côte d'Ivoire, and how you've worked to make sure that your citizens' voices are being heard in shaping developmental priorities and investments? So over to you, Mr. Prime Minister, Excellency. Great to see you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the U.S. government for allowing me to share on behalf of my head of state, Alassane Ouattara, our experience in building sustainable democracy. I would like also to thank MCC, not only for the MCC effect you were talking about, but for the project, the ongoing project that we have together, and also the regional project we're working on. Thank you, Alice, for all your commitment your engagement. I don't want to forget Mahmoud Ba, who's been in Abidjan at the early stage, helping us, and everyone. To come back to the issue and the very important case we're talking about here, I would like to say that yes, as far as we are concerned, getting out of the political crisis in 2011, the MCC scorecard was definitely the roadmap of what helped us do our reform. To shape this reform, when you get out of a crisis, it's like, have to do everything. You have to go everywhere. Where do you start from? Where do you go? In which way? That's where the scorecard with its 20 key issues, indicators, help us, as you pointed out rightly, was really on our vision, the way forward. We set up a team led by a head of state, and we went through every and each of these indicators, knowing that if we were able to meet them, not only we will get our MCC, but also we will move the country toward democracy, and that was very important to us. So you gave the score we were able to achieve that we didn't even accept we're really expecting ourselves from the beginning on only a couple of years, but we're able to do so. So thank you for MCC. Thank you to MCC. The scorecard was definitely the right roadmap. And the 20 indicators, each after each, we work on them to be able to pass them, to get to the project. All these indicators were ranging from economic all the way to political and human capital. And all that brought us naturally to reforms that help us leapfrog on the economic side. From 1% of growth rate when we came, all the way the next year to 8% steady growth all along until 2020 when COVID arrived. Even in 2020, where most of the country were into recession, we did 2%. Then we came back lately on the past 2 years to more than 6%. So all the reform we did went, as I say, following the key indicators of MCC, going from rule of law to political right, to freedom of information, to civic freedom, to governance effectiveness, to fight against corruption. We did realize how important it was, and also to gender equity, which is a key issue on the process of democracy. Sometimes we don't really catch that really to the extent that we should, but very important, the women issue. Then at the end of the day, what did we gain from all that? 3 major achievements. The first one is political stability, because when you get out of the crisis, the things you're really aware about is stability, because you don't know how stability is important until you lose it. Peace and stability. We gained stability. We were able, just 5 years after the crisis, to have the UN peacekeeping force leaving the country, even 1 year ahead of schedule, which you rarely see in a lot of countries, because they stay a very long time to be sure that everything is fine before you leave. But there, just after 5 years, they left. They realized that, everything was under control, democracy was moving forward, peace and stability could be sustainable, so we didn't have them to be there. One achievement. The second achievement is that we really went through a political dialogue with all the 21 political parties and the 20C civil society organization went through every and single claim that they do have on the political issue, on the social issue, on every single thing that everyone will need to feel in peace in a democratic country. And we all signed an agreement to say, yes, here we are. We all admit that in the country we're living in, anything that will be an obstacle to democracy has been raised, all of us. Third, if today you go to any country in the world and you ask or you request for a status of a refugee from Côte d'Ivoire, it will be refused. UN last year in June came out to the decision that Côte d'Ivoire is a country where no one from the country anywhere in the world could be accepted as refugee. So when you reach that point, you could see that you have moved really forward. The third achievement is that we were able to finance the economy. Financing the economy, I think the President Barrow was talking about it, is key at the end of the day, because you need resources to be invested in the infrastructure that will give services to your people who will feel that they have a decent life, and at the same time, grow your economy. Raising these resources is very difficult if people do not have the perception that they are in a country where the peace and the stability is sustainable, where you have democracy, where the economy is going to grow sustainably. And that's where I come from my friend Ken Waller comment he did a couple of minutes ago, talking about comparing democratic environment to non-democracy, meaning, yes, it happened that in some non-democratic countries, we got development. But the problem is that that only rely on the leader. The day the leader is moving, you don't know who is coming next. You might either stand still or even go back. So the word is that, yes, you can be developed, but you have no insurance that it will be sustainable generation after generation. This is a very key issue. Sustainability on the democracy. We've seen so many countries, we thought everything was over. Now this country passed the threshold. They are democratic. And then one guy came, took over, and we went back 20 years back. So this is a very important, the strengths of institution and democratic institution. So I think that to finalize, the gain that we had going through MCC scorecard, as I say, the reform that we did and the sustainable democratic environment we think we're in is the private sector development. If you do not have a private sector development, then there is no way out, because at the end of the day, this is where you generate your revenue from. If you do not want just to get money from outside, lending money, and not pay attention on how you're going to reimburse this money through raising resources inside and getting jobs to the kids and the people you have in your country, then you will not be in peace. Because at the end of the day, it's the people who are living in the country, if you are able to give them the kind of life they are expecting, then you are in peace. Giving the life they are expecting, giving to them means you can bring them the services they are expecting, and you can insert them in the economic life, meaning there are private sectors who can recruit the youth that you have invested to give education. Otherwise, as you know, these kids represent more than 70% of the population. In my country, 77% of the population is aged under 35. If you don't get a peaceful, comfortable life to these kids, no democracy will be able to sustain that all anymore. So every and each of these things are key as far as not only creating an environment that is favorable to sustainable democracy, but also, to keep it, moving forward and going. So I want to stop there, just as I went over, the key major issues. And as the other questions come, later on, maybe I will dig into it to go much further down the line on what, we can talk about national development plan, how we go to, include everyone from, bottom to up. But then, I will answer to all these questions as they arise. Hello?
So Prime Minister Achi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Well, let me thank you, and I know it's late where you are, so we're, again, very grateful to you for being with us. Let me turn it over to you, Ken, to pose questions to Dr. Flan and Tamar. Please,
Thank
over to you.
First to Dr. Flan from Cote d'Ivoire. Dr. Flan, as an Ivorian academic and scholar, your work has focused on conflict resolution, mediation, and social cohesion. From this perspective, what could be done to support continued democratic progress in Cote d'Ivoire?
Merci, madame. Je voudrais sacrifier à la tradition qui consiste à remercier les organisateurs de ce panel de très, très haut niveau. Et c'est un privilège pour moi, un honneur aussi, de partager le même espace que des personnalités de haut rang. Et je me réjouis de voir ici le Premier ministre Patrick Achi, Premier ministre de la République de Côte d'Ivoire, dont je suis originaire. En tout cas, merci au MCC. Merci également à l'ANED de m'associer à ce rendez-vous extrêmement important. Effectivement, en tant qu'association à caractère scientifique qui s'engage sur des thématiques telles que la cohésion sociale, la promotion de la démocratie, nous avons un petit parcours en toute humilité, et ce parcours-là nous a permis de plancher sur des questions relatives à la réconciliation nationale, à la suite de la profonde crise et de la guerre que la Côte d'Ivoire a eu à vivre. Nous avons travaillé également sur des questions relatives à la prévention des conflits, et nous travaillons aussi sur la question de la consolidation de la nation, du renforcement des institutions, etc. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour élever le degré de démocratie en Côte d'Ivoire, pour permettre à une structure comme la nôtre, le Centre de recherche politique d'Abidjan, d'atteindre des objectifs? Eh bien, je pense qu'il y a 3 leviers essentiels sur lesquels il faut travailler. Le premier levier, de mon point de vue, c'est la société civile elle-même. Bien souvent, il y a des perceptions qui font état de ce que la société civile en tant que telle est faible. Elle est faible tout simplement parce que, selon les perceptions, il y a une partie de la société civile qui se présente comme un bras séculier de l'opposition et donc qui se substitue à l'opposition. Et il y a également une partie de la société civile ou des acteurs de la société civile qui se placent totalement dans le prolongement du gouvernement et donc à eux également, à leur niveau, faillissent à leur mission qui consiste à relever les défaillances qui peuvent arriver dans tout système de gouvernance et de proposer des solutions. Donc, le premier élément, je pense qu'il s'agit pour moi de construire une société civile, donc une force sociale qui puisse émerger et qui puisse se positionner comme une voie sûre, certaine, qui, en se mettant à équidistance des pôles partisans, par exemple, puisse contribuer véritablement à relever, à conseiller, à faire des recommandations et à faire avancer la société. Ce qu'il faut faire aussi, c'est que bien souvent, et ça il faut le dire tout net, on pointe souvent du doigt les gouvernants dans nos espaces, en Afrique au sud du Sahara, en Afrique de façon générale, Mais il faut noter aussi que l'opposition elle-même aussi doit être interrogée. Notre opposition, de façon générale, parfois fait montre de quelques contradictions, des incohérences, à telle enseigne que correspondre à ses objectifs ou à son rôle, qui est bien entendu tout en affaiblissant la position du gouvernement, contribue à faire avancer la démocratie, la stabilité, la paix. Donc, de mon point de vue, il s'agit là de mettre l'accent sur la formation politique, la formation des acteurs politiques, et ça, c'est un élément extrêmement important de mon point de vue. Je peux citer comme un autre point, travailler sérieusement à la relation qui existe entre le citoyen et la justice. Entre le citoyen et la justice, c'est-à-dire que amener le citoyen à s'approprier la justice comme étant un pilier central dans le dispositif qui puisse, dans la durée, stabiliser tout système. Et ça, je pense qu'on pourrait imaginer, à l'image de ce que nous avons fait déjà en Côte d'Ivoire, les autorités ont eu à faire et qui est vraiment à saluer, la mise en place d'une police de proximité, travailler aussi à, pourquoi pas, une justice de proximité, de sorte que les magistrats ne soient pas trop éloignés des populations, l'appareil judiciaire ne soit pas perçu comme quelque chose qui est très, très loin des habitants. Et je pense qu'en travaillant effectivement à cela, les populations vont s'approprier l'appareil judiciaire et tout ce que cela comprend. Et cela va consister à stabiliser, à renforcer les institutions et à donner un gage certain sur la voie du développement économique et social. Donc, voici, de mon point de vue, ce que nous pouvons, ce que je peux dire actuellement. Et je voudrais dire que, comme la Côte d'Ivoire a traversé des moments extrêmement difficiles et que depuis 2012, nous nous réjouissons tous des avancées qui sont réalisées par les gouvernements successifs du président Alassane Ouattara et également aujourd'hui, à la tête du gouvernement se trouve le Premier ministre Patrick Achi-Jérôme. Il y a un chemin très, très important qui a été effectué et ça, on se rend compte. On se rend compte évidemment et il faut saluer ces actions et il faut encourager cela. D'abord, la question de la croissance économique a été abordée par le Premier ministre Patrick Achi tout à l'heure. Il y a de nombreux investisseurs qui se précipitent en Côte d'Ivoire parce que la Côte d'Ivoire est très attrayante de ce point de vue. Et également, on assiste à des efforts du point de vue du gouvernement dans le processus de redistribution parce qu'on assiste à une électrification à grande échelle. Aujourd'hui, les villages de plus de 500 habitants sont électrifiés et ça, c'est à mettre à l'actif du gouvernement actuel. Il y a également la réalisation de vastes infrastructures. Certains sont achevés, d'autres sont en cours d'achèvement. Et il y a ce qu'on attend également, et le Premier ministre, Monsieur le Premier ministre Patrick Achi l'a souligné tout à l'heure, c'est le processus du dialogue politique. J'estime que c'est un cadre extrêmement important parce que cela permet aux principaux acteurs qui s'affrontent au quotidien autour de la question du pouvoir d'État, soit conserver, soit le conquérir, mais également ceux qui se sont battus hier de façon militaire, de se retrouver et de penser à l'avenir de la Côte d'Ivoire, au présent et à l'avenir de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, je pense que c'est un cadre assez important et il faut saluer également le gouvernement qui a institué cela. Et je me réjouis d'avoir participé à la 5e phase de ce dialogue politique à l'invitation du Premier ministre Patrick Achi-Jérôme lui-même. Et donc, c'est un cadre qu'il faut encourager. Il y a des résolutions qui émanent toujours de ces plateformes. Aujourd'hui, certaines réalisations sont en train d'être faites, d'autres, avec espoir, seront accomplies. Donc, en substance, voici ce que je peux dire concernant ce qu'il faudrait faire pour faire avancer la question démocratique en Côte d'Ivoire. Premièrement, c'est travailler sur la société civile. Deuxième élément, c'est mettre l'accent sur la formation politique, formation des acteurs politiques et institutionnels. Et troisièmement, il faut travailler sérieusement à la mise en place d'une justice de proximité parce que la complicité entre le citoyen et la justice renforce les institutions et permet d'accroître la légitimité de tout processus de processus politique, électoral, mais également en termes d'implication, en termes d'inclusion et de participation des populations dans les politiques publiques. Et ça, c'est extrêmement important. Et tous ces éléments-là sont en lien et je pense que voici de façon succincte ce que je peux dire au sujet de la question que vous m'avez posée, madame.
Mark, can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry, yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, Mark. Do you see opportunities or have ideas for ways that civil society and government can work cooperatively to deliver economic progress? And what, in your view, would be the key benchmarks for that progress?
Thank you, Kenneth and Alice, for the question. I would first like to recognize the presence of the two African leaders, first my President, President Barrow, and Prime Minister Aji, and then also the U.S. Ambassador to the Gambia, Ambassador Kroma, and all the other dignitaries available here in this panel. I mean, there are actually numerous ways that government can work with civil society to answer your question to deliver economic growth, especially in increasing domestic revenue collection, which continues to grow at a snail's pace. And I'm glad that the president mentioned the challenges his government is facing in mobilizing domestic revenue. And engaging civil society experts on macroeconomic issues can help government explore new and innovative revenue mechanisms which can contribute to economic growth. Like the president said, the Gambia is the smiling coast of Africa, and tourism is another major revenue generating sector. And expanding and introducing new tourism sites will not only attract tourists and increase revenue collection, but it will keep the smiling coast smiling. So these are some of the areas that I think when we venture into it, we will be able to increase domestic revenue in the country. And then also the agricultural sector is actually, it used to be considered as one of the the backbone economy of the Gambia. And industrialization of the agricultural sector will promote domestic revenue and production of goods that will create market for destination Gambia, which will increase domestic revenue collection and also strengthen the growth of the economy. And then most importantly, the dollar currency, which obviously we've been seeing it going up and down, and currently is actually really against other regional currency situation like the CFR, the dollar is really not performing as it used to perform before. And this also amounts to because of so many goods, especially goods that are actually being shipped, come through Senegal because of the challenges that our port authority couples with. And I'm glad that they're also expanding and building up new dry ports, but also because some agricultural products that are exported from Senegal also have an impact on the economy of, or the growth of the dollar currency. Industrializing the agricultural sector can reduce poverty, especially in rural areas where poverty is at worrying 69.5%, and also increase the employment of unemployed persons within the rural settlements. And then also the industrialization of this particular sector will also increase the employment of people within the sector, which is at 9.2%. And also this will also maximize agricultural sector growth. And then also it will reduce the risk of youth taking the literacy in search of opportunities to live a dignified life in Europe and other destinations. So there are so many opportunities that if the government engages civil society actors, especially those within the macroeconomic space, working on public finance management, we are able to work with the government to explore new innovative revenue domestic mobilization mechanism to ensure the economy of the country get back to where it used to be. I mean, the success of the President Barrow's government is also a success to the civil society work. I mean, it actually make work less easier for civil society if the government works in tandem with us in identifying revenue collection. And then also we as civil society are very much connected to the communities. And we've been working with, let's say, for example, the Ministry of Finance, taking them to the communities, explaining the citizens about where their taxpayers' money is actually being kept, how it's actually being used, what type of development they will be receiving. And what that does is it actually increases citizens' confidence and interest in participating in public finance management and also decision making in government process. And when citizens have confidence that their monies are going to be spent on the areas that they are actually in need of, then it will also increase and motivate citizens to pay taxes, which is also an advantage for the government, because when taxes are not paid, then the government will not have the required revenue that they forecast for that particular fiscal year. And then also that would mean undermining the government's development growth and then plan for that particular fiscal year, because revenue forms revenue informs the implementation of government's plans. I mean, it is revenue that turns out to become an expenditure. So for us, the civil society, I think this has been, especially us at Gambia Participate, these have been some issues that we've been working with. But most importantly as well, with all of the things that I talk about, industrialization of the agricultural sector, identifying new tourist sites and also new revenue generating mechanisms. There's one thing that can only help us reap the benefit of economic growth, and that is if we have our economy digitalized. Digitalizing the economy will frustrate the personalization of public wealth, and it makes it easy for government to track the trend of money that have been collected. I see the GRA under the Borough Administration now introducing the Asikuda wall, which digitalizes tax collection or revenue collection at GRA level. But there are other areas that we could actually work on, like the post authority, minimize the physical interaction with individuals on cars. And then we've also seen the Senegambia Bridge, how revenue was able to hike in terms of collection, comparing human revenue collection mechanism as opposed to digitalizing or a digital process where money is actually are collected. So, we actually came from a dictatorship where there were high prevalence of corruption, which actually helped the economy of the country. Also, like say the dictator to get the economy to kneel down on him, and he get to have the decision to decide how to spend that money, personalize it, live in a very luxurious life. And this actually had an impact on the on revenue generating institutions. And then until today, we have seen that maladministration of public wealth in the current government, and I'm sure that President Barrow and his government have started working on reducing that, because we've also seen him introducing an accountability mechanism for officials that takes bribe, which is very encouraging. And for us at Gambia Participate, we are interested in supporting that process, which we've actually been doing from the onset of our establishment. So frustrating the occurrence of public graft will also mean that there will be guaranteed that the economy will continue growing at a very high speed. And then also the monies, the revenues that are actually collected will end up getting to be expended on addressing the fundamental issues that citizens actually feel, especially those in underprivileged settlements that do not have access to basic needs. So these are some of the issues that I think, to answer your question, will help the economy deliver, but most importantly, to establish a participatory democracy that will help democracy deliver. Over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Marv.
Great. So I'm going to step in and take over at this point, because we are a bit short on time, and I want to make sure that we do have a chance for our panelists to, as a collective, reflect on some of the things that have been said today, and give a chance to give some final reflections and thoughts. Now, I know I joke about this a lot, but it is an internal thing where we say challenge is our middle name. We are Millennium Challenge Corporation. And so I just wanted to, before turning it over to Ken and Alice for final remarks, highlight that today we've heard about connection and making sure communities feel heard as well as delivered to. We've talked about partnership and partnering for sustainability, strong economies, economic and social gains. And then we've also talked about how, as a collective, both panelists on the government side as well as in civil society have worked towards making all of these gains happen. So I'm going to challenge our panelists and our guests to give us in 2 minutes one way they will work with each other in their respective countries to advance democracy in the coming year. So I will start with President Barrow. You can hear me, but the question to you is, in 2 minutes, can you tell us a way that you will work with civil society to advance democracy in the coming year?
Thank you very much. I think this question is very important. We will, as a country, as a head of state, I think one thing is very important to work with the civil society. One most important thing is tolerance. And my government is really known for tolerance. And we know that the civil society they are representing the people. And as our government, we try to make sure that we address the poverty in this country. And addressing poverty, that means you have to make sure that you have social projects. That means you have to have resources. To have those resources, we need to put our heads together. We need innovative financing, as Mr. Yang is saying. We have to make sure that we industrialize. And in industrialization, we add value. I think agriculture sector is the backbone of our country. We are concentrating on that. We are partnering with some Gambian business people to make sure that the agriculture sector is considered as a business. These are the areas that we are making so. We work with the civil society and to make sure that we improve on poverty alleviation. In the Gambia, we have a lot of challenges, as I said, because of 20 years experience. That 20 years experience, we need to enlighten the people to make sure they understand what democracy stands for. I think the civil society can contribute in that, so that we make sure that the people are enlightened. We educate the people so that the people will understand what it stands for. That means everybody have to work together, or we have to work together to address our economic situation. But I think this is key, and this is important for the civil society to understand that government is a partner. You know, government is a partner in development. I think if you are seen in that light, as we are partnering together, we can put our heads together to make sure that we address some of the challenges we are facing as a country. Because we operate under a very, very tight budget, because our resources are limited. So I think that is key for the civil society to understand that government is a partner, and we will be tolerant, we will be open to make sure that we work together in the interest of our country. Because our history, we have seen 2 coins, that is 30 years of democracy and 20 years of dictatorship. And it was very, very difficult for us to make sure that we overcome dictatorship within a short period. It was 22 years. So that 22 years is a history in our country, and we want to move from that. Moving from that, that means people have to be together. We have to work together in the supreme interest of our country. One thing is important, social projects. That means you make sure that the living condition of the people is well managed, and cost of living is not very high. Because if cost of living is high, it affects our people, and it can cause civil unrest in our country. And these are areas that we need to address and create jobs for our youthful population that will address definitely poverty in our country. I think poverty is a big challenge, and to address it with hands on deck, that is civil society, government, all institutions to work together. But to sustain our democracy is to build strong institutions. I think if we build strong institutions, we will sustain democracy and build on our gains. Thank you for this question. And once again, we thank you again for inviting us, for recognizing Gambia to be part of this very important panel.
Let's see. Prime Minister Achi, one way that you all will work with civil society to advance democracy in the coming year.
Yes, I think that President Barrow and our fellow expert over there raised key issues that are, first of all, reinforcing the social society people by providing them with enough resources to survive, because it's not always easy for them to survive all the way, through. Second comes with education, and I think he mentioned it, because at the end of the day, civil society are the people of the country. So if the level of education is not high enough, that people understand the whole issue of democracy, of the strengths of the institution, why they need to be there, where is the interest, so on and so forth, then you have the government in one side and the rest of the population who don't know what we're talking about, and the civil society, a couple of people in the middle trying to make themselves heard. So once help them one way or the other way to survive. Second, education. But education brings a very big issue that I want to end up with, even though it doesn't look that important in the loop, but yet education means that you have, as long as your people are not educated enough, they cannot understand all the key principles underlying what you want to make them understand, which is democracy is the way forward for a sustainable development and growth. Yet it's for them. Because when you have a country where 70% of the population are aged under 30, then your biggest threat, the biggest threat of the democracy is neither the government or the civil society, whatever, it's these kids, the millions of kids, who cannot get a job. And these people are frustrated, they are hopeless, and they throw themselves in the hands of any extremist who will come and talk to them to say, these people, they cannot do anything. How can make all your dream? Or they throw themselves in the ocean because they think that in Europe they will find something, or they throw their hand in the hands of terrorists who want to destroy the country. So education is very important. But once they are educated, if you do not let a private sector grow so that they can recruit these youth people, then give you peace and stability at the basic of democracy, then whatever you do, you will not get there. So yes, private sector, yes, education, and yes, inserting these people. Plus, the private sector is the one who is going to help you generate the revenue, domestic revenue he was talking about. Because don't get into the debt trap. You need infrastructure in order to give service to your people. But if you go toward raising resources, then you have to find a way to pay the debt. And only growing your private sector will help you grow your domestic revenue. And this is the key issue that we really have to all be concentrated on. Yes, for democracy, but help us increase our private sector, and that will help a lot in the process of maintaining a sustainable democracy in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Dr. Fan.
And thank you, and hi also to Excellency Ba, who should be, on the panel somewhere. My ambassador from the US in Abidjan. Thank you.
Dr. Flan. Briefly, how will you work with the government to advance democracy in the coming year?
Disons que lorsque le Centre de recherche politique d'Abidjan organise des activités, nous associons les autorités. Au niveau national, par exemple, nous avons organisé aujourd'hui même une activité sur le dialogue interreligieux Donc, faire en sorte que cette force sociale-là, ou bien que le dialogue interreligieux se transforme en une force sociale capable d'impacter la décision politique et puis capable d'influencer les habitudes de façon positive. Et lorsque nous avons organisé toujours ces activités-là, pardon, nous avons associé une personnalité ou des personnalités du gouvernement. Donc, depuis 2017, par exemple, nous avons vu la participation de la ministre Maria Toukone, le ministre Kwadio Kona-Bertin participe également à ces activités, et nous produisons des documents que nous transmettons aux autorités. Ça, c'est au niveau national. Quand nous sommes, par exemple, à l'intérieur du pays et que nous organisons des activités, il y a une coopération entre nous, entre la société civile, donc, et puis les acteurs institutionnels, à travers la présence des préfets des régions, etc., etc. Le cadre le plus patent de la collaboration et que nous entendons renforcer avec le gouvernement, c'est dans le cadre du dialogue politique, mais également dans le cadre de toute plateforme qui puisse travailler sérieusement sur des questions qui divisent en Côte d'Ivoire et qui menacent à la limite les institutions. Ce sont des questions d'ordre électoral, ce sont des questions d'ordre sécuritaire, parce que le Premier ministre a évoqué tout à l'heure la menace terroriste et la Côte d'Ivoire a déjà essuyé quelques tirs de ces individus. Et tous les pays, par exemple, de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, les pays côtiers de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, sont dans le viseur. Donc, les questions liées à la sécurité comme étant des conditions de stabilité durable des institutions, sur ces problématiques-là, nous entendons bénéficier du soutien du gouvernement, de l'accompagnement du gouvernement, bénéficier d'une collaboration et que les résultats des travaux que nous faisons, par exemple, soient pris en compte ou alors soient étudiés pour voir dans quelle mesure certaines pourraient être prises en compte dans la gouvernance. Donc, voici comment nous entrevoyons la coopération avec les acteurs institutionnels, avec le gouvernement, avec l'État de Côte d'Ivoire pour l'année prochaine.
Excellent. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Nyang, if you could just tell us one way that you will work with the government to advance democracy in the coming year.
So there's a saying goes that government is always busy working on urgent matters than the most important matters. So it is also civil society that sometimes call the attention of the government to these important matters. And for us at Gambia participating in the civil society organizations, I think our relationship with the government in achieving the democratic dividend is actually symbiotic. So it's a collective success if the democratic dividend is actually achieved. So we have been working with government institutions. We enjoyed, fruitful relationship between government institutions like the Ministry of Finance, the National Assembly, National Audit Office, and then that of the Judiciary of the Gambia. So we've been focusing on 4 fundamental issues right now, which is electoral reform, public finance management reform, anti-corruption, and then also in partnership with the National Endowment for Democracy, we have a constitutional reform project that we are actually implementing. I'm glad that the president is recently have been emphasizing that he will help get back the constitution that the parliament actually failed to legislate or pass in 2020. So on anti-corruption issues, we've been working with the judiciary, supporting the judiciary of the Gambia in developing anti-corruption models, both judicial ethics and conduct curriculum and anti-corruption models to increase the integrity and the integrity of judges and magistrates, but also to increase the integrity of the judicial sector. And I'm glad the president also mentioned how the judiciary sector was able to swiftly attain independence come somewhere around 2017 when the former dictator was actually voted out. And then also working with the Independent Electoral Commission on Electoral Reform, the Ministry of Finance and National Assembly on fiscal transparency and budget oversight, and also most importantly, public participation in the budget. So like I said earlier on, our interest in reaping the democratic dividend is symbiotic, and then civil society advocates on policy, and to activate any policy advocacy, your ultimate goal is to activate a change. And sometimes it is the government that have the decision-making process to activate that change. So we identify issues, and these issues becomes policies, and these policies can only be activated by the government. So we are working closely with the government. Yes, we do accountability mechanism to help the government to be on track, but part of the work that we do is having these collaborative efforts with government institutions in addressing the important matters.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of our panelists. I'm going to turn it now to Ken and Alice for final and closing remarks. So over to you, Ken, and then Alice.
Okay, thank you very, very much. It is very encouraging to hear not only the natural tensions sometimes that takes place between civil society and government, but the real opportunities in both countries for a genuine partnership between government and civil society. It's very encouraging. I wish there was more time, because one of the issues that I would like to hear from the participants is about the institutions of representative democracy, political parties and parliaments that must ultimately aggregate the interests of civil society and the citizenry at large. Because ultimately democracy requires strengthened policy development and capacity within parties in order to help raise the level of political discourse. And it requires effective legislatures with significant roles for opposition voices and the means to build broader consensus on public policy issues in order to avoid policy reversals when governments turn over, something the issue of sustainability that the Prime Minister talked about. I was struck by Prime Minister Aceh's reference to autocratic leaders and political and economic sustainability. I'm reminded of a friend and a late friend and former political leader of Chile who once said, "It is very difficult to fine-tune your dictators. You don't know what you're going to end up with." I wanted to thank Alice Albright, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, Prime Minister Aceh, Dr. Flan, President Barrow, and Mar Niang for a really informative discussion. I just want to conclude by saying that in this interconnected and interdependent world, what happens within borders of nations has regional and sometimes global impact. And contrary to that famous tagline in tourism marketing, what happens, let's say, in Abidjan or Banjul doesn't stay there. The important efforts of our distinguished participants working inside and outside of government will have impact for the people of their respective countries, as well as for the entire West Africa region. I know I speak for the National Endowment for Democracy, which remains committed to supporting our partners not only in Cote d'Ivoire and the Gambia, but in West Africa region, the continent, and worldwide, who are working to secure a free, democratic, and prosperous future. It was President Kennedy who once said that democracy is not a final destination, but a call to an untiring effort. Thank you all. Alice.
Ken, thank you. Let me close, and I know we're running just over time, but let me add my word of thanks to everybody who's been involved in this, starting with you, Ken, President Barrow, Prime Minister Aceh, Dr. Flan, and Mar. On behalf of the administration, let me thank you all for joining us at this. The summit actually starts tomorrow. Today is a day of kickoff events. But for setting us on an incredible course to have what I think will be a very productive summit. So I thank you all on behalf of the administration for joining us. Let me thank the team for all of the hard work that's gone into putting this together. Not easily done when we're bringing together so many locations. I think this has been an incredible conversation and has really connected so much about the theory of what we'd like to see in terms of democracy development, how important it is for democracies to deliver, in practice, how hard that is. And hearing from all of our guests has given us just incredible insight into how two of our dear partners at MCC have made real progress in delivering for their citizens. We've heard about, the details of how important it is to listen to people, raising resources, making sure that tax systems work, making sure that governments are listening to people, that people are sharing their views with governments, and tracking results. One of the things that I've taken on board is how important it is for donors, of which we are one, listen to people in countries and make sure that we are not just paying rhetoric to what some people call country ownership, but for us, that is at the heart of how we work. And I don't have time to go into all the details there, but next time. And also how important this is over the long term. So I think this has just been an incredible conversation. I thank everybody for being involved, Ken, for you and NED for hosting us, co-hosting this with us. And I hope we can do this again soon. So let me say goodbye to everybody. Goodbye, good evening. Have a good rest of the day. And thank you so much for joining us here at MCC. Thank you.